Well, it's good to see every one of you here this morning. I have met Brother Albert Stein that's sitting up here. So let's make him feel welcome as we go through the day. Okay, I'm going to do something a little different than what I normally do this morning. I'm going to really step outside of Genesis to make some points. The Bible fits together just like a pair of gloves. I mean, everything ties together. And last week we looked at chapter 36 of Genesis, which is the genealogy of Esau. And I made the statement as we started that I was going to take a look at the relationship between those people who ultimately are called Edomites and the Israelites. And the bell rang before I got very far into that. And I just kind of wrapped it up. And I just think it would be worthwhile to go back and look at that relationship in some detail. It's a fascinating relationship, and I think it's worthwhile for us to chase that all the way down to the end of the Edomite nation. And let's start that by going back and looking at the prophecies, the original prophecies regarding Esau. Genesis chapter 25, verse 23. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Now we know that the 2 nations are the descendants of Abraham, the Israelites, the descendants of Esau, the Edomites. We also know that the descendants of Esau were given land in a physical sense, just like the children of Abraham, the Israelites. We also know that the older shall serve the younger. Now, how do we know that? Where are we told, or are we told, anything specific about the Edomites serving the Israelites? Anybody remember that? In 2 Samuel chapter 8, we're told that King David conquered the Edomites and that they served him. So we have a very specific end to that prophecy, that the older shall serve the younger. Skip over to chapter 27. Verse 40. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. And this is speaking of the descendants of Esau. We talked about how he would serve his brother. And it shall come to pass, when you become restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now, I don't know of any specific scriptural reference to how or when that yoke is broken. But we're going to look at some passages this morning where it really talks about Edom being strong. And these passages that we're going to be looking at are much later than David. So we do know that even though for a period of time the Edomites served the Israelites, they again became a powerful nation. There's a lot in the Old Testament where God is taking and prophesying vengeance upon the Edomites. They did something throughout the history here that made God very angry. And we're going to look at a couple of passages here that talk about the vengeance that he's going to take on them. And what did they do specifically that angered God to the point that he's going to destroy them? That's what we're going to look at this morning. Did they do something specific that raised the ire and the anger of God to that point? I think most of us, as we contemplate that question, would go to Numbers chapter 20. Beginning in verse 14. Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, you know all the hardship that has befallen us, how our fathers went down to Egypt, and we dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians afflicted us and our fathers. When we cried out to the Lord, he heard our voice, sent the angel, and brought us up out of Egypt. Now here we are in Kadesh, a city on your border. Please let us pass through your country. We will not pass through fields or vineyards, nor will we drink water from wells. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right hand or to the left until we have passed through your territory. Then Edom said to him, you shall not pass through my land, lest I come out against you with a sword. He doesn't allow them to do that. Seems like a simple request, but the king of Edom does not allow that. Could that be what raised the ire of God, why he was so angry at the Edomites? That could be part of it, certainly. But I think in what we're going to read as we go through and look at some of the prophecies that God gives the Edomites, that this really doesn't fit entirely the description of what they have done that makes God so angry. So let's go to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 35. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it, and say to it, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against you. I will stretch out my hand against you and make you most desolate. I will lay your cities waste. You shall be desolate, then you shall know that I am the Lord. Why is he doing this? Why does he want to do this? Because you have had an ancient hatred and have shed the blood of the children of Israel by the power of the sword at the time of their calamity. Okay, there's clue one. At the time of their calamity. When their iniquity came to an end. Therefore, as I live, says the Lord God, I will prepare you for blood, and blood shall pursue you, since you have not hated blood. Therefore, blood shall pursue you. Thus I will make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it the one who leaves and the one who returns. And I will fill its mountains with the slain, on your hills and in your valleys and in all your ravines. Those who are slain by the sword shall fall. I will make you perpetually desolate, and your cities shall be uninhabited. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. because you have said, these two nations and these two countries shall be mine, and we will possess them, although the Lord was there. What two countries or two nations are in view here? Most people believe, and we see this a number of times, that Judah and Israel are used to describe what we would call the southern kingdom. We'll see it specifically described as Judah and the remains of Israel. So most people believe that the two countries here that the Edomites are looking at in terms of conquering and taking possession of are the southern kingdom, Judah and Israel. And if anybody disagrees with this or has a different thought, please don't be afraid it's going to make me mad that you disagree with me, okay? I will do according to your anger and according to the envy which you showed me in your hatred against them, and I will make myself known among them when I judge you. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. I have heard all your blasphemies which you have spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, they are desolate, they are given to us to consume. Thus with your mouth you have boasted against me and multiplied your words against me. I have heard them. The whole earth will rejoice when I make you desolate. Let's go to one more. The book of Obadiah is literally a prophecy about what is going to happen to Edom. The entire book. It's a very short book, but that is the purpose, is to tell Edom what their future looks like. And pick up the reading in verse 10. For violence against your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. In the day that you stood on the other side, in the day that strangers carried captive his forces. So we're looking at a time when strangers carried captive his forces, and the Edomites stood on the other side. When foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, even you were as one of them. But you should not have gazed on the day of your brother, in the day of his captivity, nor should you have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Nor should you have spoken proudly in the day of distress. You should not have entered the gate of my people. Apparently, whatever is happening here, the Edomites joined in and entered the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Indeed, you should not have gazed on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. You should not have stood at the crossroads to cut off those among them who escaped, nor should you have delivered up those among them who remained in the day of distress. But what's he talking about here? What is this event that the Edomites participated in? They stood at the crossroads and caught all of the people that were escaping and either killed them or turned them over to the conqueror. Psalm 137 also discusses this, and there it's mentioned specifically Babylon. So what God is so angry at the Edomites about is their participation and helping the Babylonians when they destroyed Jerusalem in 587. That was an event that God just simply could not overlook. They had been enemies of Israel. They had not allowed them to cross, but this appears to be the breaking point, really.
This may be...
Wait, just a minute. We've got to...
Sorry. This may not necessarily be relevant to what you're talking about, but I was kind of thinking about the earlier passage where it said the ancient hostilities or whatever, and I just kind of want your opinion. Do you think that goes all the way back to Esau and Jacob and the hostilities there, or do you think that just goes to where when Israel or Judah, I don't remember which, conquered them and they became, you said David, they were subject to David. Which do you think that ties back to, or is it just all of it?
Well, that's a good question, and my answer to it is when we last see Jacob and Esau, they appear to have good relations. When they met, as Jacob was coming from Haran, then there was no hostility. Jacob was scared to death, but Esau did not take advantage of the situation. They got together and apparently in good times buried their father. So we don't see specifically that Jacob and Esau had major conflict near the end of their life. So it would seem to me that as time goes on, the jealousy develops, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, the other thing, though, is we all know that sometimes a parent will have an issue and a child will pick up on those. And then the parent will, forgive or whatever, but those children don't.
Yeah.
So it could be even, it could be that too. I was just,
Yeah.
It's always been something that I've always wondered is does it go all the way back? Because, and I'm trying to remember, and help me remember, did the Lord ever say anything to Esau about, getting along or
Well,
not to attack his brother or anything? I'm trying to remember that.
he said, "You will live by the sword."
Right.
Now, that's not specifically targeting the Israelites alone, but it's probably included. I think the prophecy is there that there would be conflict between Israel and Edom. Bill?
Jim, in an overall way, it impacts on us as well. God was telling these people what to do, and they weren't doing it. And in this case, it was even more pronounced because they were what he had as a people at that time. In other words, the others were enemies of those people. And today we have apologists even in the church for some of the error that's taught in the world. And it seems like there's a passage, it just crossed my mind, I can't find it, but it says, if you're not with me, you're against me.
Yeah.
And it's, just from the things that you read, they seem to be disconnected in a way, but in a very real sense, they're very much connected because these are things that God had expected of them, and they failed to take notice.
Yeah. Well, they had both been given physical gifts of a land. Esau took possession of his much, much earlier than the Israelites did. So they were there, they were ensconced, and no doubt there was jealousy as the Israelites began to move in and conquer land and take land and settle it, even though they did not take any of the Edomite land. They were specifically forbidden to do that. But still, there would have to be regional jealousy as you see a massive group of people coming in and conquering like the Israelites did. So, anything else? What do we know about the fulfillment of the prophecy against Edom? Do we see that fulfilled in the Bible? I don't think we really do. It's probably talked about in Daniel chapter 11. But Edom was still a force to be reckoned with. And combining history with Daniel 11, Edom ceased to exist as a nation in the 2nd century BC. There was a period of time, and it's called the Maccabean Revolt. We've talked about that several times. And most people believe that during the Maccabean Revolt, not only were the remnants of the Greek Empire kicked out of the Promised Land, kicked out of Canaan, but that the Maccabees also destroyed Edom and forcibly made them convert to Judaism. And that's, I think, a pretty recognized event in history. So even though we don't really see it fulfilled in Bible, in Scripture, it did occur, but it was in what we call the intertestament times, really. Okay. I find that interesting. I don't know whether you guys do or not, but I think it was. So let's pick up now. We'll go to chapter 37. We're going to start the story of Joseph. And I came across this in some reading that I was doing about Joseph. This is a list of parallels in the life of Joseph and the life of Jesus. Okay? Some of these are meaningful, and some of them you kind of wonder what, but just think about these and keep them in the back of your mind as we're going through the remainder of Genesis. The brothers of Joseph were envious and hated him, just so it was with Jesus, who was hated by his brethren. Well, that's pretty generic. Both Joseph and Jesus were sold for silver. The efforts of Joseph's brothers to destroy him actually elevated him, and the efforts of Satan to destroy Christ made him the Savior of all the world. I don't know about that one. He was the Savior of the world. Joseph found himself, in a sense, between two malefactors, the butler and the baker. Christ was crucified between two thieves. Yeah? That's fact. Is it meaningful? One of the characters was forgiven and elevated. The other was not. Just so the two thieves with Jesus. One was forgiven, the other not. Joseph, beloved of the Father, was sent with a mission to the brethren. Jesus was sent from the Father with a mission to Israel. Joseph begged of the chief butler that he would remember him when restored to his honor. And in an interesting interchange resembling this, but with marked difference, the forgiven thief requested that Jesus would remember him when he came in his kingdom. Joseph saved the whole Jewish nation from the famine and death by bringing them into the land of Goshen. Christ saves the new Israel by bringing them into his kingdom. Joseph begged the body of the first Israel from Pharaoh, along with the privileges of burying it. Another Joseph begged the body of the new Israel from Pilate, along with the privilege of burying it. Some of those are fascinating just in terms of, you can't make any major pronouncements, but just the parallels between the two, especially that last one. I thought that was one of the ones I had never thought about. Okay. Chapter 37. Now Jacob dwelled in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Joseph is one of those, he's a little bit unusual in major characters of the Bible in that we don't see a whole lot of things that he did wrong. You know, we look at the patriarchs and there is as much about bad behavior as there is good behavior. But we really don't see that about Joseph. So let's think about that in terms of what we're going to see here. Joseph brought a bad report. And we don't know whether the bad report was true, whether it was not true. We don't know how bad it was. But I think we do know what the brothers thought about it. He was a tattletale. You know, was that fair? We don't know. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. 2 points here. This apparently has occurred after Benjamin was born, so that Benjamin would really be the son of his old age. But here, Jacob is considering Joseph the son of his old age. And he continues the practice of making a difference in his children. Favoritism always creates problems. You would think Jacob, of all people, would have realized that with the early conflicts, especially that he had with his brother, based upon his parents having favorites. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So this wasn't any kind of a secret harboring of a grudge. This was open warfare. They could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. What was the purpose of Joseph telling his brothers the dream? Should he have done that? If he knew they were already jealous of him. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." This certainly was not designed to make his brothers feel any better about him. And his brother said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us?" Kind of a prophetic statement, because yes, he's going to rule over them. But boy, it did nothing to quench the fire that was raging in their relationship. "Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Could Joseph have done anything to reduce this hatred? Pardon? Pardon?
God does not lie.
God does not lie.
God made his plan. You can't stop him.
Bill told me to quit mumbling.
I'm sorry, I still can't hear you, Paul.
I said, Bill told me to quit mumbling. I said that this was all in God's plan.
Was it God's plan, or is God using the events?
He used the event, but it's still, to me, it's in his plan for him to
Whatever it is, God is using this to his advantage.
right.
Okay. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." Now, I think it would be pretty obvious that the sun and the moon are mother, father, and the 11 stars, the brothers, bowed down to him. This is after he'd already had a horrible reaction when he told the last dream to his brothers. So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Apparently, Jacob is beginning to maybe see a little light here, in that he dismissed it, but he also kept it in mind. And there's a little bit of shall your mother and I. Now, Joseph's mother has passed away. So we don't really know exactly what he has in mind here. Is Leah now considered the mother of the clan? Don't know. Okay, is there any thoughts or questions or comments regarding the beginning here? What we've established is the conflict between Joseph and his brothers. Verse 12. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Does that sound a little unusual, questionable? Where did we last see Shechem? What was going on in Shechem the last time that we talked about it? Jacob was fleeing Shechem because of what his sons had done to the inhabitants of Shechem. They had killed all of them. Jacob was concerned that all of the people would hear about what had happened and would come after him. So here we are, and it can't be all that many years have passed, because Joseph was only 17 when all of this started. And Joseph was born in Haran. So here, for some reason, Jacob feels comfortable about sending his sons to Shechem to pasture his flock. Now remember that Jacob had purchased land in Shechem. So perhaps that was the impetus. Obviously, one of the impetus is there's grass there, there's food for the flock. But Jacob also had land ownership in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." Shechem is about 50 miles away. Sending a 17-year-old alone to a place that you were fleeing just a few years ago doesn't sound like a well thought out plan. But as we've said before, God is using this. So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" There's a lot of speculation about who this man was. Jewish tradition says that this man was an angel. And that would certainly fit with a lot of the things that we've seen about angels appearing to Abraham especially. But all we know is a certain man. So he said, "I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks." And the man said, "They have departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. It's about 15 miles north from Shechem to Dothan. Dothan is a historic site. It was excavated a few years ago, so there's really no question, I don't think, about specifically where this is. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Their brother. The speculation is that they recognized him because of that coat that Jacob had made for him. And we know that he did have that coat with him, or tunic. Then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, 'Some wild beast has devoured him.' We shall see what will become of his dreams." The culture of that time was pretty rough. It really was. But this seems just kind of out of bounds. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." Reuben seems like he's maybe trying to make amends for what he had done to his father. Remember, he's the one that slept with his father's concubine. So here he's standing up and trying to make a stand to rescue Joseph. And implicit in this is that apparently after saying this and convincing them to do this, Reuben left. Because we're going to see later on when he comes back and finds the pit empty, he's distraught. He apparently had no dealings in the selling of Joseph. He convinces them not to kill him, but just leave him in the pit so that he could come back later and get him out. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Now, apparently these pits are used to store water, kind of like a cistern. Frequently they were shimmied up with rocks, but apparently they were deep enough and probably sloped enough that there was no way you could get out. And they sat down to eat a meal. Now think about this. Here your brother has come in, probably brought provisions, brought some resupply. You throw him in a pit. Your intention is to get rid of him. You sit down and eat a meal, maybe even some of the stuff that he brought. And we're going to see later, and you can imagine Joseph would be pleading with them at this time, that it fell on deaf ears. They sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry them down to Egypt. Okay, they're going down to Egypt, and Dothan is on the major trade route between the countries east of Canaan, and they come over and cross the Jordan, south of the Sea of Galilee, and come down the coast of Israel, coast of Canaan. So they see them coming. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood?" Now look at who does this. Judah. Let's not kill him. Let's just sell him. Let's make some money. "Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. And let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Then Midianite traders passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Now there's a little bit of, controversy is not the right word, but in one place, these people are called Ishmaelites. There are a couple of places they're called Ishmaelites, and then Midianites. How do we rationalize that? Ishmael is the son of Abraham and Hagar. Midianites are the sons of, or the descendants of Abraham and Keturah. The best explanation, or the simplest explanation, is that They're Ishmaelites living in Midian. You know, Ishmaelites is always used as a racial group, if you will. Midianite is a geographic place. That's where the people of Midian settled. Don't know if that's specifically why those two words are used here, but it's an explanation. Then Reuben, apparently he's been away and didn't know any of this was going on, returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. Reuben is the eldest brother. He would be the one that's in charge of not only the flock, but in taking care of his brothers. So if anything goes wrong, it's going to fall to Reuben. And he returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more, and I, where shall I go? How am I going to explain this?" So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" Foolproof plan. Was that two? Okay. We will pick that up in verse 33 next week.